Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inky Thoughts Podcast. Today's a special episode. Not only will I not be the only bearded ginger fellow on your screen today, or who you'll be listening to today, because I have a very cool, funny guy along with me. I also will not be the only Dane, and funny enough, we're going to be talking about something that comes sort of close to both our interests, but especially to my guest's interests, which is Viking and Nordic tattooing, and perhaps a bit about the lore around it as well. But I'm not gonna dilly-dally anymore. So Peter, would you please introduce yourself?
I can try, certainly. My name is Peter Oakmund. I am a Danish tattoo artist that lives in the northeast of England, and I am hyper specialized in Nordic and historical ornamental tattoos. And on purpose, I do not use the term Viking when labeling what I do.
And that's exactly one of the main reasons why I wanted to get Peter on this episode, because I myself have had the pet peeve of looking around online nowadays in the social media landscape and seeing so many people globally nowadays wanting to sort of adopt that moniker of Viking or Valkyrie, and then getting all these tattoos that, at least to the untrained eye, I would argue, seems very at least like taken out of the Viking show, which I think maybe a little bit to blame about some of this craze, but loosely Viking and Nordic, I would argue.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's a bit of a pop culture thing going on, although since the emergence of like Celtic armbands and stuff like that many years ago, it has been a popular theme, but it recently has picked up massively.
You think it's all to do with the show, Peter?
I do, definitely. But the show, both the tattoos in the show and everything else, like anything, historically correct in Vikings and the Vikings Valhalla show and all these things, they've taken it with a grain of salt, that's for sure. It's they're a bit all over the place. Like
there's some liberties at least.
If we quickly skimmed through the tattoos that are like very visible on the main characters of the Viking TV show, you have Salin style 1 and 2, which is here 400-500, all the way over to a woman that has a neck and chest piece, which is Una style, which is the 10th, 11th century.
Wow, that's quite a jump. Like that's 500-600 years.
Yeah, that's time traveling to get to 2. And yeah, we'll talk about this, but the Vikings, as far as we know, didn't actually have tattoos, which is one of the statements that pissed people off. So
it's kind of funny because I always thought, like, I'm not a historian myself, and I haven't, despite how people judge me for having being from Denmark, having a red beard and tattoos, never really too fascinated by Viking history. I mainly learned about it in high school, and that, like most of us do when we're, 16 to 19 years old here. And I never actually watched the show Vikings either, because I watched the first episode and then they claimed Kattegat had mountains in it, and I was like, no, I'm not if anybody ill-informed, Kattegat is a very flat bit of a piece of the Danish, a piece of Denmark in the Jutland area. And yeah, you can ask any Danish person that you would be hard-pressed to find a mountain there.
Definitely. I mean, our highest point in Denmark is a hill, for fuck's sakes. So,
well, they weren't without the sense of humor, because one of them was named the Sky Mountain, and if you translate it into English. But yeah.
True. That is true. I mean, that must have come from people trying to communicate to the gods from a hilltop and therefore Sky Mountain. But hey,
and not caring to go to the north of Sweden. But anyway, so first time I really heard about Vikings not having tattoos, I think before I even saw one of your clips, Matt Lotter, who I'm also quite fascinated by, even though it's not his expertise, also covered in this at one point to me that, yeah, they didn't. Like they if any of them did, it would especially not have been to the extent some people have thought or suspected.
I think that's, well, it's one of those things, like with a bit of creative anachronism, we can definitely guess that the Vikings had tattoos. But my eternal, the hill that I will die on is, as long as we don't have archaeological proof and more than one written source that hints at Vikings with tattoos, we can't say that the Vikings had tattoos. And I know that there's lots of, like, you have Ötzi, who is much older than the Vikings, who has Scythian You even have contemporaries around Europe at the time of the Vikings. And to be clear, the Vikings are from like the 7th century to the 11th century. I can never remember because it's different how we say it in Danish terms than English terms. But it's a
Yeah.
400-500 year time period. And in that time period, there are peoples around Europe that actually applied tattoos to them. But that doesn't mean that the Danes and Swedes and Norwegians did. But I do think there's a massive chance that if they'd come across cultures with tattoos, they would have dug it. They would have gotten into it
Yeah.
because, I mean, we're talking about a culture where people were willing to file their teeth for decorations, and they covered themselves in gold and silver and embroidery and beautiful cloth and all these things, and the pearls and beads and amber and all these things. Very, very lavish. So of course they would have decorated their skin if they came across it, or if it became a thing, because tattoos have shown up in different cultures all over the planet simply
Yeah.
because when you cut yourself, you want to keep your cut clean. So you put ashes in it because that's a very clean thing. Ashes has soot in skin, you have a tattoo, and then you go, oh, this is clever. I'm going to do it again, but on purpose this time.
Yeah, I mean, there's some anthropologists and archaeologists that argue. I mean, you can't find any actual tangible evidence of this because that would be, well, impossible. But some of them at least speculate that tattooing could be as old as as old as when we started living in organized groups, really. So like 250,000, 300,000 years old, and that's just tattooing with like decoration in mind. They could speculate that if you just talk tattooing with, oh, I got this cool scar down my arm because we were out hunting buffalo on it's somewhere, and then the horn grazed me, and I want to show this when I get back to my village because that could be a week's travel away. Like
you
put
look
some
badass
dirt in
with
it.
scars, and you look even more badass with dark scars. At the
Yeah,
same time, I do think that humanity would have needed to reach a stage where we were um, pale enough to be able to see
yeah,
these tattoos on the skin. Other cultures would have applied scarifications, like certain tribes in Africa still do, which are absolutely amazing. So, for example, Utsi, his tattoos are visible, but he did have very dark skin. They just found out that he's most likely from like the southern end of the Balkans, had very tan skin. So when he was alive, his tattoos would have hardly been visible on his skin because it wasn't like high quality ink, but they're still very visible now.
yeah. Plus, they would have been applied with primitive tools back then, or at least primitive for our time. But
Yeah, definitely.
I doubt they would have the same. Uh, um, I mean, I'm not a tattoo artist myself, so I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. But I doubt they would have the same uniformity in how deep they, for example, would go into the skin, or have the same ease to draw lines in the same straight way.
I think it depends a lot on what stage of a culture you would encounter it. If we look at tattooing still applied today, you have, for example, the Maori moho tradition, which is done with scarification, but it's very precise scarification. But that tradition of doing it that method goes back very, very far. And you quickly learn, I think, not to go too deep when you do a scarification and do an ink rubbing, because you got to be a little bit careful.
Yeah,
Um,
I think you'll add some trauma to it if you go real deep.
I mean, it's already, I think, the moho. Jesus, I mean, that must be an ordeal, right? But I
Mm,
do think that if a culture at the stage that the Vikings were at, for example, took up tattooing, then it wouldn't be with a primitive look. It wouldn't be
no.
rough because everything they did artistically is quite phenomenal. I mean, I have a catalog on my computer with about 10,000 images of Viking age artwork, from the finest to the crudest carvings. And even the crudest things that were made, like a weird scribbly thing around an oar hole on a ship and stuff like that, clearly made by a sailor who was bloody bored. It's still really good. It's still craftsmanship. And therefore, I think if the Vikings, or Scandinavians at the time, or what we should call them, were tattooed, it would have been pretty good tattoos. I can't
Because
imagine.
we knew how to make really good iron and bronze tools and stuff like that, and quite fine tools as well already.
Yes, and we knew how to refine colors and inks for different things. Not as well as, for example, the Chinese cultures knew how to produce ink. Chinese ink at the time was absolutely phenomenal. But we could even have traded our way to that because there has been trade via the Silk Road and Constantinople. So who the hell knows? But making a good needle in the Viking Age, definitely not impossible.
No, I mean, even if you look at the Inuk culture in both Alaska or northern Canada territories, or Greenland even, they could make incredible really needles for their version of tattooing with just seal bones and stuff like that. So,
absolutely amazing what they did and what they do for that matter now. Like the traditions are being picked up by the Inuit, and like it's having a resurgence and done traditionally. And the tattoos are staggeringly beautiful. It's fantastic.
I do want to get Maya on to talk about that at one point.
Fingers
crossed she'll be along for it, but so we shouldn't dive into that too much now. The Inuits too, though it is
for sharing her knowledge. It's wonderful. I absolutely love Maya.
It's absolutely awesome, and it's also beautiful to see her help reclaim a really powerful and awesome, unique part of her culture, of the culture of the Inuits.
Yeah. It's amazing to see what is happening there. I'm very impressed. It's lovely. So,
but that is sort of like it's that in stark contrast to some of the stuff you're, for example, talking about on your social media nowadays, which is, for lack of a better term, contemporary Nordic tattooing, and some of the misunderstandings there.
Yeah. So where the hell to start? I think let's start with telling the listeners that the only mention that we have of anything Viking-y with tattoos, well, there's two variables, right? The nearest of Norsemen that are mentioned to have decorated skin is, I think it's Tacitus, who mentions the Germanic northern tribes having decorated skin. But that's a Roman general from the 4th century. I don't remember when Tacitus was around. And then we have Ibn Fadlan, a scholar from Baghdad who traveled to the mouth of the Volga River, if I remember correctly, where he met a traveling people that were defined as the Rus Vikings. Now, Rus Vikings does not mean Scandinavian.
Nope.
It could be there were Scandinavians. It could be that there were basically people from any culture that came into contact with Constantinople, because this is the Black Sea, so they could have picked up people from anywhere. But we can hope maybe there was some Scandinavians amongst them, but most likely it were peoples that lived along the Volga and Dnieper River that went raiding, just like the Scandinavians did, and went trading, which was like one of the primary things. And they had decorations on the skin. Now, we don't know for certain if Ibn Fadlan actually saw tattoos or if he saw people who had war paint or even something like henna paint or woad left in their skin. He described it as tree forms and leafy forms and stuff like that. It doesn't go into deeper details about it. So it's a very, very sparse mention of this. But it does give people, a little bit of blood on the tooth. Like they're like, oh my God. And I love it. But I keep saying the Vikings didn't have tattoos as far as we know. I personally hope they did. And I might, as the glaciers...
you don't have to convince me. I absolutely hope they did as well.
As the glaciers are melting due to global warming, I do hope that one day a Viking will show up frozen in ice with tattoo, and we shall all rejoice for a moment before the planet catches fire. And it'll be cool. But in the meantime, the way I see it, this is modern times, right? This is 2023, and we don't need the Vikings to have had tattoos. We know they had artwork. We know they had the runes. We know they had magic. We know they had gods and mythology and amazing stuff. And if we want to relate to that, there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with reinventing anything and binding ourselves to a modernized version of an ancient culture. I personally think that it's beautiful. The artwork is absolutely stunning. I work with it every day, even when I'm not tattooing. And I try to share it as much as I can. And I keep preaching that it's not something that should be kept secluded to people with Scandinavian heritage.
Yeah.
Because even us, we don't have any specific rights to it because we don't even know if our ancestors had these fucking tattoos. So who gives a shit? It should just be shared because this is beautiful artwork.
Absolutely. Fully, that already gets close to one of my own personal pet peeves, and why I'm happy my own Mjolnir I have in here is right up there, so I can sort of show it off when I want to show it off. Because I think sadly, especially back here in Denmark, where we're both from, you see it quite often that the wrong people get very adamant about Viking heritage and having Nordic tattoos and stuff like that.
You have to have the right roots and the DNA and all these things.
Yeah.
It's a tricky one for me because I do believe that cultural appropriation is shit. I believe that if you go out and take art and designs from minority cultures that are still using it, and you abuse it, you make money out of it, or just mock it or anything like that, then you're an asshole, and you don't have the right to do that. You don't deserve to even use the artwork. It should not be adorning you in any way. But with the heritage from Scandinavia, like we were a conquering bunch of maniacs that went into the world and colonized and were terrible. We can give something back here.
Yeah.
Plus, they're all gone. Like it's not like any of us walk around speaking Northern, anyways. So let's just
or writing in Futag or something like that.
I do, but very, very often. But no, on a general basis, it's not like we still use it in school, is it? So yeah, but there's a lot of people on. It's harsh to say, but they're on the wrong side of the fence who will use Scandinavian heritage artwork to promote their cause. And I mean, this goes back to the 30s and 40s, where the Nationalsocialistische Arbeiterpartei of Germany thought that it was great to adopt the Fullfort of Scandinavia, the swastika, and to adopt the runes and many other things into their iconography. And they did it very, very well. I mean, the images of the Nazis marching down the streets, it's impressive shit. It's terrifying, just like a Roman legion. But that doesn't make it okay that they took our artwork and used it in the campaign to eradicate other people. And sadly, that has been perpetuated by these assholes who still think that Hitler was a great fucking guy, and Trump is a great fucking guy, and we should all listen to these guys because they must be right because they really like white people. And it's such a strange, vague idea. Also, the whole like you have to have Scandinavian blood to have these tattoos. Why is this important? Why is it important where you were born? Like you were born in Scandinavia by luck, from Scandinavia by luck. Yeah, you didn't do this. You didn't choose to do this. So what gives you a special right to tell others what they can and cannot do? It's a weird thing, and especially when it's used to promote hatred and violence and oppression. I'm dead against it, and I talk about this a lot on social media, and I believe I often get a pushback from people who are like, oh, you should just leave the politics and just do artwork. And to them, I can only say fuck off, because art and politics and art and debate has gone hand in hand since the Greek Empire some 1,000 years ago. Like, art is used for criticism of society. It is used to highlight things. It is used to diminish things. It is used to mock or to praise. And therefore, as an artist, I do strongly believe I have the right to speak. I also believe everyone has the right to speak. But going out saying, oh, you shouldn't talk, just do tattoos, that is utter bullshit. Because
it's such a way of like of trying to segregate. Oh, I don't like your opinion, so I'll use what you do to say, or who you are to be like, oh, you shouldn't, just shut up, don't talk about that. But everybody has a right to be political. It's a person. As a person, it's a thing.
definitely. But I also see why the opposing side, I mean, we've already drawn a line in the sand here, why they see it as a difficult thing that artists oppose their opinions, because artists tend to be well-spoken people who can actually present an argument and get involved into shit, and they have a voice because we get seen. So to them, I'm of course a little bit dangerous. I mean, across social media platforms, there's about 1 million profiles that follow us. And when I reach out to everyone and I speak my truth, because that's all it is, it's just how I see the world, a lot of people get affected. And then every time I do it aggressively and say, "Dear Nazis, fuck off," we lose 1,000 followers. And then we gain 5,000 other people who think that is fucking awesome. And that's okay.
Yeah, but it's not exactly a loss losing 1,000 Nazi or Nazi supporters, to be honest.
Like that whole, well, you just lost a follower. Oh, thank fucking God.
I think, not to use an old Danish phrase, so I'll try and use the English version here, but it's very much separating the herd in a good way there. Like,
definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's almost using their own methods of eugenicism, isn't it?
Well, they luckily tend to out themselves by being so gatekeeping about something they see as like marking them out or being like their special little heritage. Like, it's so weird seeing somebody with a massive Odin tattoo be like, and often not well done, honestly, whenever they are complaining, be like, "Oh yeah, Peter should just shut the fuck up, because what does he know about this?" And you've sat there and read up on the history and read up on all sorts of, done your research, and they've just stuck to their claim without any real reasoning behind it.
Yeah, and it's fun. It's fun to debate with it. I find it sad that very often these debates dissolve into them trying to insult me again and again and again. I had a debate with some guy. He kept calling me a cuck and saying that I loved the people of Judea, Jewish people, which was weird because I've never spoken much about Israel or Israelite or the Judean religion or anything like that. He was clearly an American that had a dig against Jewish people and thought that he should call me a cuck. And every time I asked him, like, "Can you explain a little bit more about why it is that you use these arguments?" He just went like, "Oh, you're clearly a cuck." Blah, blah, blah. It's very much like just shouting into a closet. Nothing good is going to come back. Nothing at all is really going to come back.
Arguing with a wall, like.
Yeah, it was very sad, and it happens again and again. And I love arguing. I rarely get upset about anything. I'm autistic as fuck, so I'm really difficult to rile up. It's easy to get me like.
But I'm an academic, so I kind of get how you feel. I do love arguing because if it's something I know something about, I'm not going to get riled up. I'm just going to tell you what things actually are and wait for you to either see reason
or dig a deeper hole for yourself. Stumbling around in the spinach, as we so weirdly say in Danish.
Yeah, that's actually, I've forgotten that one. Thank you.
Strange. But I don't mind shouting on social media and be like, "Oh my God, you're a fucking idiot." It's not like I'm actually about it. I find it to be hilarious. And I don't think I am in any danger of losing the debate because there's no debate to be lost.
No.
But I do get upset when I see neo-Nazis in America running around with the Waldknut on their shield, preaching and shouting things. I saw a video from a neo-Nazi demo in Florida. People in red shirts marching, shouting Heil Hitler, and this guy had a bindrune on his face. I did a video about it and put it on TikTok. It got taken down because there was neo-Nazis in it, which was weird because I was speaking out against them, but fuck it.
Yeah, that's strange.
He had a bindrune on his face. I proclaimed that it just said penis. That wasn't true. He said Wotan or Woden. So basically this guy's marching around with a tattoo with Odin's name on his face, which in so many ways is funny to me. Like, if I was inclined towards that very extreme political spectrum of neo-Nazis, right, I wouldn't have chosen Odin. Odin
it is a weird choice for that, because that's the wisdom, the all-father, the knowledge, all that stuff. Like,
also a thieving, rapist, weirdo.
also all the bad stuff, yeah.
I mean, he's got so much mysticism and that, but he doesn't have that whole like leadership, war, power, all that stuff that they should be going for. If that's, I mean, it seems to be their brand, right? So it's very confusing. I get the heritage part. They keep preaching about like their heritage and all that stuff. But come on, living in America and preaching about heritage is a weird fucking thing because it's not your land. So hey. But yeah, they are a fun lot, and I disagree with them thoroughly, and I will always speak out against them. I believe that it is also my duty to speak out against them because I work with Nordic culture, Scandinavian heritage, and I've reached a certain level of fame, which I don't like, but I have, and therefore I have a platform, and it is therefore very, very necessary, in my personal opinion, to use my platform to speak out. And I'm often disappointed in others that don't do it. And yes, this is a dig at them. I think that if you have a certain level, like if you're seen as an elder in a society in one way or another, you should speak wisdom and truth. And if you're not willing to speak out against Nazis, I mean, silence will get someone killed. It might not be you, but there's a long writing about first they came for the gypsies, and then they came for the Jews, and then they came for the socialists, and then they came for the learned and those wearing glasses, and then when they came for me, there were no one left to speak out to protect me because they were all gone. And that might happen one day. I wear glasses, and I'm a weird autistic person, and I'm an artist. I would like to protect others, and one day someone will need to protect me.
And they came for the red hair too, so like we have a lot of targets on our backs.
That is true. Yeah, a weird side fact. Did you know that you and I only exist because we are gingers, and thereby our kinds have survived the Black Plague of Europe?
Yeah, I heard about that. It's fucking weird.
We're genetically immune to the plague. And if it hadn't been for that immunity, we would have been long gone. The ginger genome would have been bred out of humanity simply through natural selection, and because the genome is so weak. So we would have been gone. But so many of us survived the Black Plague that we are still around. How fucking weird is that?
I mean, yeah.
Anyways.
Didn't imagine to be told that today by you, Peter.
Sorry, my head is full of absolute nonsense. So
that's great.
Where shall this conversation go from here?
Well, I was actually thinking about to move it perhaps on a lighter note than the fuckwits you sadly also have to deal with, who are the worst of the worst. On a lighter note, there also seems to be that you also try to help people steer clear of some common mistakes in Nordic tattoos.
Yes, that's true. I mean, and there's a lot to steer clear of. Just the basic misunderstandings of like people will get designs such as the Web of Weird tattoo, thinking, oh, this is an ancient symbol, which was invented in the 1980s. Or they get one of the Galdra stuff. Hey, I'll show this book. They'll get one of the Galdra stuff, yes, from the Sorcerer's Screed tattooed, thinking, oh, this is super Viking-y. But they're from 16th century Icelandic manuscripts. Or they'll get a Valdknud and be like, this is a Valdknud, this is Odin's symbol. We don't fucking know. I mean, it's a symbol from the Viking age and a little bit before that. But the name Valdknud was ascribed to it, I think, in the 70s or 80s. Yeah. So there's a lot to educate people on. And I try to make sure that I'm not saying people shouldn't get these things tattooed.
No.
By all means, go get them tattooed. There's so many things you can get tattooed that are a little bit risky. I mean, the swastika, for example, of which I have many tattooed because I have many Scandinavian and Hindu sun symbols all over my body. There's nothing wrong with getting these symbols tattooed as long as you know what the fuck you're getting tattooed.
Yeah, exactly. It's about knowing what it actually is.
Yes,
because it's you do look a bit silly if you come out with, I can't remember which one it was, the Vurt, and it's from the 1970s, and you go like, oh, it's an ancient Viking tattoo, and then you run into somebody like Peter or me, and we'll be like, no, it's cool and it's definitely Nordic, but it's not ancient nor Viking.
Yeah, or even things like texts in runic scripts where people are like, "Oh, this means brotherhood." It's like, no, it fucking doesn't. That means hilltop, but nice try. This shit happens all the time. It's become like, you know, the kanji symbols that people had so many of in the 90s and the noughties. Like,
Oh, that's where it comes in handy being meticulous, like I'm guessing we both are, because I had mine proofread by actual Japanese people I knew at the time. Don't want to get a kanji and it says the wrong thing, because that's where I think it becomes shame on me as well, but also sort of appropriation, because you don't even care to read up on it enough to do it right.
yeah, it's true. But I mean, and even when I'm gonna mock you, no, sorry.
Oh,
Even with the
absolutely, Peter. Feel free.
even with the kanji, right? It's a funny thing that we Westerners like those symbols so much and we get them tattooed, because if you go to someone who has grown up using the kanji as script, if we have the symbol for home tattooed, to them it just reads house. You just wrote the word house or possibly home, right? So we appropriate a language and a text type without having full understanding of the fact that, well, it's not sacred or deeply meaningful things. I get questions every day on text, on Instagram and TikTok and email and shit like that, where people are asking me like, what would happen if I write my son's name in runes? But one of them is an I, and that's Isar, and Isar is seen as a negative rune. Do I then bring misfortune to myself? Right? No, it's not how it works. I love that you're asking me, but that is, in one case it's just a text type, and in other cases it is magical symbols, which have a very loaded meaning put into them, because we don't actually know how far back the meaning of the runes go.
They may have changed loads of times before they were ever noted down or anything like that.
No doubt about it. And even when it was noted down, whoever wrote it down will have had ulterior motives.
Oh, and there would have been like a different one in Jutland from the one over on Sealand back then. Definitely.
There's so many of varieties of the runic alphabets that are.
I mean, you live in England now. Think about how quick the dialect changes from city to city in England. I mean,
I'm very close to Yorkshire, and Yorkshire is one of the places on the planet with the most dialects.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely crazy. You can walk from one town to the next and not understand what the fuck happened. It's as if he's changed.
And yet people think, oh yeah, no, this is definitely still gonna mean this, even though it's 1,000 years old. It's definitely nothing's changed. This is definitely what it means.
But it's like the sagas, right? Like all the Nordic mythology. Like Odin said this, and this witch said this, and then this happened in his stories. Yes, but these stories were written down 300 years later by a Christian politician who probably had a plan about what he done. I mean, Snorri was very dedicated to the stories, but I cannot bring myself to believe that he didn't make any minor edits.
Nah, that was definitely something. I mean, plus, like we talked about, it was before that. It was word of mouth.
Yeah, it was a complete.
And there would have been so many different versions of some of the similar myths from all over Scandinavia and Iceland and everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, the only sagas that we have any level of like certainty of is the ones that have depictions of them. For example, Sigurd Fafnir's there's several carvings that has his story depicted. So it's like, okay, cool. We've got, well, this is literally set in stone. So we've got some bearings that part of it at least is true. But everything else is kind of like, it's very easy to throw some shade on it and be like, I don't know.
That made me think of a weird question, but I'm kind of curious about this now that we're talking about it. Have you ever had anybody ask to get the rune stones tattooed on them? Or stuff from them, you know, the ones we have here in Denmark.
Yeah, I've done some of the depictions on the
Oh,
stone.
yeah.
I mean, I've done the Aros mask many times, and I've made many masks based on the Aros masks. To those of you who are interested, this is a very beautiful god mask that is carved into a stone found outside Aarhus, and it is now in the Morsgård Museum in Jutland, and that museum is worth visiting. It's worth going to Denmark to go to that place and walk the coast a bit. It's
Same
lovely.
with the Roskilde one if you like Vikings.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you could do a very cool Viking tour if you went from like Morsgård Museum, then Lyra and Roskilde, and then onwards to Sweden and Norway. The big Oseberg Museum is closed right now, but I mean that should just be something anyone interested in the Viking Age should just do at some point in their life.
Definitely. Maybe that should be the next thing you do, Peter. Make a little Viking travel book for the Scandinavia.
Not a bad idea. I will note
Not a bad idea, honestly. I want to mention him that. A footnote.
But yeah, like I have done some rune stones, a lot of depictions from the rune stones. There's many carvings that have inspired me. I've done the crucifix, the Christ part from the Yelling stone as a fallback piece.
Right. I think that's one that probably gets a lot of misunderstandings outside of Denmark and Scandinavia.
Possibly, yeah.
Because people are like, why is there suddenly a cross there? And you then have to explain to them, well, there was this whole transition thing where Vikings were converting to Christian religion.
I mean, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of crosses, artifacts with crosses and carvings and jewelry with crosses found from the Viking Age. We know kings and queens and rulers that became Christians long before that Harold christened the Danes and all these things. It was just a thing. There would have been a time where it was 50-50, but I don't think there was much internal struggle about it. That whole, like in the last Vikings TV show, there's a lot of like conflict between the pagan Vikings and the Christian Vikings. Almost a civil war. It's like, we don't have any. No one mentioned.
I've never heard about that. The only civil war I remember is the Crown Prince of Denmark killing his father and his brothers, and then the English king being like, this is a good time to push them out.
Yep. But no religious civil war in Scandinavia.
Never heard of that.
I can see why it's easy to read into, and also like the Danes were christened because, as a nation, we had to, because there was an emperor down in Germany that was Christian, and he thought we should be Christians or have the shit kicked out of us.
I mean, there wasn't a lot of us back then either, so it was kind of just listening to.
No, and like on a military level, we were inferior by then, so time to wear that cross and the cerk and do some penitence and shit like that, So I generally don't do too many crosses on people, I will admit, but I've done some. There's some beautiful crosses carved over here, the Manx carvings, and there's some down in Cornwall that are absolutely beautiful artifacts, and I don't really have a problem with it. I find Christianity to be a little bit difficult to stomach because it's another religion that's just fond of genocides.
You don't have to convince me. I'm an atheist, very rationally so an atheist. But I did find it funny actually thinking about something that I was living in Scotland, as I said, till earlier this year for some time trying to do a PhD, but I found so many Scottish people that had. And I get that aside of, especially with their 10 years relationship with England, they really love paying homage to the Viking Age and like how they, in their mind, were friends with the Vikings and allied with them, and all. Some of them have heritage from us. So there's so many people with Viking tattoos, or like something they think is Viking tattoos. And even I've had to go and be like, you do know Odin had one eye to one guy. But it's very clearly from the rest of the depiction, because there's Hugin and Munin and the two wolves and all that. I can't remember their names, but then it's a two-eyed Odin, and I'm like, that's even Marvel got that one right. You've got to remove an eye there.
Well, you could argue, if you were really pedantic about it, that Odin would have had two eyes at some point in history before.
Sure.
But I do agree, if you're depicting Odin, you should definitely lose an eye on him. But I think The Scots have a love for the Scots would have loved to leave England and become part of Scandinavia.
Oh yeah, no.
Because Britain, the Great Britain and the UK thing has turned to utter shit. But I do also think that they feel a strong kinship with us. And when I'm in Scotland, I feel very, very welcomed.
Yeah. Oh, they're
They
lovely
speak,
people.
they
Absolutely.
speak funny like us, anyways. Lots of beards going on, lots of burliness and quaffing of beer and shit like that. We get along famously. But Scotland was like in that era, it was a Christian kingdom slash Viking kingdoms.
Yeah.
You've lived there, so Sutherland in
Oh
Scotland.
yeah.
Named Sutherland because it was the southern end of the Viking kingdom of the Orkney Islands.
Ah.
Because the Orkney Islands was ruled by a Dane, I don't remember his bloody name, and he managed to push his kingdom all the way down there. So there's lots of artifacts and findings from that time that correspond. But I also think that the Scots have a certain connection to a lot of the borderlands people up here in the northeast, because there's a lot of that whole stones with Neolithic carvings, ring patterns, and spirals, and all these things. Because this was the corners of the Isles that the people were pushed to during the last ice age, because there were nowhere else to go. So the last vestiges of any form of Neolithic civilization was from here and up into Scotland and then parts of Ireland, and across the country from where I am to the other coast, to Blackpool or whatever is over there. So there's a connectivity with the artwork and the cultural history. And there's a big fat border and some wars with England and all these things. And there's still a bunch of castles and fortresses standing from these wars. But they seem to get along better than they do with Londoners, for example. But
but I mean, that is not to digress, but that is also Londoners. I mean, I do love lovely people in London. There's lovely people everywhere. There is just, to translate into English, a bit further between the shots.
Yeah, I remember watching Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels ages ago.
Classic.
And there's this scene where there's a guy from Manchester, I think, who's arguing with a guy from London. And as they walk away, one of them, the northerner, goes like, "Southern fannies," and the other one says, "Northern monkeys," and they walk the opposite direction. It's like, why do they dislike each other so much? And now I've lived here for quite some time. I've lived here for 19 as well, and I figured it out. They don't like each other because they are very, very different people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I get along way more with the Northerners. I lived in the south of England years ago, but to bring a long story short, definitely like the Northerners more. But I have noticed. But speaking of the Northerners, it does seem to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, because it might have something to do with the heritage they feel themselves. But you do seem to get more Viking tattoos the further north you get in Britain.
I think even if people don't even have a drop of Scandinavian heritage, they will. If you're big and beardy, for example, you'll have a tendency to be like, "Oh, people keep calling me Viking. Maybe I should get a Mjolnir," kind of thing. So there's a logic to that decision. But up here, there is a lot of Scandinavian heritage. I mean, I am an hour away from Lindisfarne and Bamberg and all of that. And York is an hour and 20 minutes south, which was basically the capital of English Vikingdom for a very, very long time. So there's lots of Viking history here. And people know this if they're into history. I mean, you said that you learned about the Viking history when you were in high school or something like that.
Gymnasium,
Yeah. I learned about it when I started being able to read comic books because Valhalla.
Oh, that honestly, that is also a comic book that was fantastic when you were,
absolutely phenomenal.
That's a massive recommend to anyone listening or watching the comic book Valhalla. Absolutely.
And if you can't get it in English, get it in Danish and use Google Translate on your phone. It's a fantastic comic book. And there's a lot of them, and they're great. Also, I got a lot from Delorans Danmarks Krønike, the Danish. because his drawings were fun. It was so easily inhaled as a kid. So my passion for history and the Vikings and all that started very early on. And I think there's people here that they have the same thing. Like they see
I would
something,
imagine so.
they get dragged to the Jorvik Museum in York, and then a passion for it is
Because
born.
you've had reenactors there and that for decades as well,
Yeah,
doing
definitely.
Viking and battles and stuff like that.
The big Battle of Hastings down
Oh
south,
yeah.
heavy with Viking warfare. I see less reenactment over here than I did in Denmark, maybe because I was into reenactment when I was in Denmark. I might have. But I think it was more visible in Denmark than it is over here.
I think
But
so too.
it is here, and there's a lot of a wider variety of reenactment here. Like in Denmark, there's medieval and there's Viking
And
reenactment.
sometimes there's even both at the same time, which gets very confusing.
Yes, really messes with the tourists. But over here, I've seen Pictish, I have seen Celtic, I have seen Roman, and then Viking, medieval, late medieval, Victorian age, and like World War One and World War Two reenactments. So it seems that the people who do reenact are spread over a much, much more vast range of years. So that could have some impact on it.
I would imagine so. You mentioned the Picts, and I did think about them a bit earlier because we were talking about Scotland as well. But also Celtic tattooing. Do you think people sometimes mix up Celtic and Viking and Nordic tattooing?
99% of the time.
Oh, really? How come? Because I've seen it myself, so I'm asking a dumb question mainly to get it,
Because
put into words.
there's a huge crossover. So there's the visual thing. When you see something that has knotwork, people go, "Oh, that's Celtic," or they go, "Oh, that's Nordic." And recognizing what kind of knotwork you're actually looking at is quite difficult. I mean, even if you go, "Oh, that's Vikings," like it could be that it's not Viking because there was knotwork that stretched into the Middle Ages, and there was knotwork that happened a little bit before the Vikings in style within style two, style in style two, which is it's pre-Viking Age. And Viking Age is also a daft term. It should just be early Iron Age and late Iron Age.
Yeah.
We denominate the whole
We never
Viking Age.
use Viking Age too much in Scandinavia, I've noticed. We mainly go Iron and Bronze Age and stuff like that. Because
But amongst
Viking's a profession.
it is, yeah. And amongst academics, people try to get away from the whole Viking thing because, yeah, it was a job. It's something that it very much defines what the Scandinavians did at the time. We were quite famous for it. Just like the Hungarians were quite famous in the Middle Ages for being psychos on horsebacks with bows. But they were also farmers and sheep herders and stuff like that, right? But amongst the rest of Europe, they were just the dangerous people on horseback with bows that could fuck everything up, right? And we were assholes on ships that came and pillaged and plundered and raped. So it's hard to get away from that. And we've then, as cultures, chosen since the golden age of Scandinavia, chosen to take this and make it into like a big deal. Like, this was our time. Assholes with horned helmets, Valkyries, and the gold horns, and all of that shit. It's just such a glorified fucking thing. And there's no reason to glorify that.
Absolutely not.
Do
you think it's that like weird tone deaf glorification of our Viking heritage that sort of infected other countries sometimes when you see all these, because you can't get around Instagram nowadays without seeing some bodybuilder from the States or at least North America that's covered in Viking tattoos, even though he's clean with a beard and stuff like that, and wouldn't be able to say a single word in any Scandinavian language, but stands there being like, "Oh yeah, you got to live keto diet and be like close to your ancestors, be a Viking." And
yes,
and it's just where does he get that from? Like, you start to wonder, right?
T-shirt that says "Glory to Valhalla" and shit like that. There's a lot of that.
And at the same time, it's the guy that couldn't handle it being 10 degrees Celsius outside.
True. Yes. But then again, wherever they are, I could probably not stand the 35 degrees Celsius there.
You and me both. For my first episode, I had a really great tattoo artist from Florida I'm good friends with by now called Robbie Ripple on here. And I very much would love to visit Robbie one day, especially if they figure out the thermostat on Florida, because I would die getting off the airplane there.
Yeah, it is. I think especially it's a ginger thing. I used to live in Spain. It didn't do me anything good. I couldn't breathe most of the time. It was just too hot. But no, like the bodybuilders and these bros are true. I want to be a Viking thing. Again, back to the TV shows.
I think so. It seems like it's had the same effect that Miami Ink and LA Ink had on people just wanting to get tattoos back in the day. Then they see Viking and then it's like, oh, this looks so cool. And some of these guys, I sometimes think as a sociologist, they already have that macho mentality. So they're like, oh yeah, it looks so macho and masculine with the tattoos there and all that. So they go out and then they, of course, want those tattoos.
Natural attraction to it. And I think in the exact same way that people are attracted to tattoos, because when you get tattoos, you become part of a gang. You're part of the tribe. It's the same thing. Like, oh, then I'm Viking and I'm part of this. And I can attach myself to this heritage, especially with, I mean, there's many Americans, no offense to Americans, but a lot of you are rootless. You're very confused about where you're from. And when I talk to Americans and they're like, oh, I'm Scandinavian. It's like, oh, cool. Shall we shift to Swedish or Norwegian or Danish? I don't speak any of the languages. You said you were Scandinavian. No, well, my great granddad came from, I don't know, Småland. Cool, but then you're just American. And there's nothing wrong with being American because there's so much cool shit that's come out of America. Just be proud of that. This urge to tie things back to where you might have come from, some level of ancientness, to feel validated and feel that you have the right to exist within any cultural context. It's not necessary. Just be yourself. And
sometimes it really gets in the way, and I say that as a Danish person. It's fucking annoying sometimes when you just want to, exist and be like, oh, you're Danish. Oh, you're Viking then. No, just have a beard.
H.C. Andersen. Oh, for fuck's sakes. Little Mermaid, and all that shit, right? It's all right.
Read the original, you won't like him as much.
No, not so mollycoddled. Fuck, he was crazy.
Unless you are goth, then you'll probably love him even more. True. Yeah,
goth or just like industrial fishing and really bad names. Yeah, but no, I think they wish for some roots and then they find something where they feel they can grow roots. And then along comes and I deny them some of their roots by trying to educate them, which is weird because when I speak out, like we talked about before, I'm not saying you can't do this. I'm just saying
you're just correcting what it means.
But people forget to listen to the whole message, and then people get really angry and agitated, and you have to explain a lot. And disclaim. Oh God, I do a lot of disclaimers, which is weird. Like, why is that necessary? Just listen to it. I'm not trying to subterfuge any weird meaning into what I say. I speak very bluntly, and I get it. I do. When I was younger, I felt very proud that I was like a big burly bastard with a beard, and it had like a Viking feel to it. And then I learned about like what is this shit actually. Oh, maniacs. And that's not good. If you want to adore something about the Viking Age, it should be that they were survivors. They were amazing at getting through very, very, very tough conditions, both as farmers and as adventurers. And there was a willingness to take a risk to obtain something better for yourself. And with that, I mean the ones that went out and traded, because I don't respect people that go to war.
No.
That can just fuck off. But being willing to get on board a wooden boat and cross the North Sea to go trade with a bunch of people, or sail up to Svalbard or wherever the fuck and trade with Sami and Inuits to get furs, and then sail all the way to bloody Francia and trade with some other people there, all along the way having the great risk of some other asshole coming along and raiding you. Daring to take that chance, daring to want to improve your lot so much that you're willing to risk all of this shit. And most of the time just ending back home on your farm with 3 extra pieces of silver and back at the plow. And then try again
Yep.
next. That's something to be proud of, because that's fucking crazy. Or be proud of the craftsmanship that is related to it.
Yeah, that was a lot of good craftsmanship by Vikings.
Oh, fuck yeah. It's absolutely amazing thing.
And ingenuity, I would add, because you have the Norwegian Vikings who figured out a way to get iron out of mud and sediment and stuff like that, which is pretty darn well done. I mean,
yeah, just the whole, we always talk about these cultures, even way further back, as quite primitive. And then you realize that they had semi-mechanized salt mines and amazing systems to, for example, grain out ore from dirt and refine it and make better iron so that they could make better tools to become better at something, and like make better tools so they could make better artwork and all these things. It's absolutely phenomenal. And the idea of Vikings as barbarians and primitives is just so funny to me.
yeah, but it's also, I think you're right, because that goes back to the whole thing with the misunderstanding with a lot of people that get Nordic and Viking tattoos today, that I think a lot of them try to glorify the wrong thing sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
And that very much puts into it. I mean, I can't speak for your clients because I would imagine you educate them somewhat. And they might listen a bit to your material as well before they come in. But in general, you see a lot of guys where they often want a battlefield with like some Norse gods beating some whatever indescribable person or people or something, like often quite horrible. I have way more respect for people that go to tattoo artists like you, Peter, and get something that's more Nordic and actual Viking, but often also puts homage to some of the not so bloodthirsty parts of Viking heritage.
Yeah, I prefer those too. I mean, first of all, like, I used to have like a big war worm tattooed on my arm. And one day I realized that this isn't me. I'm a pacifist. I'm quite a hippie. So I ended up having it blacked out, and now it's part of like a big, basically a full body or half body tree of life instead, because that's more me. But also, like, I say no to a lot of people. Like, I get a lot of emails and I say no to a lot of suggestions. And one of them that I get again and again, every like couple of months, I get one of these. It's people who want me to do like a blood eagle tattoo on them. Like, wouldn't it be cool if you did a design of like a blood eagle on my back? It's like, no.
It's a horrible thing to get a tattoo of. I mean, even for horror fans, that's pretty fucking gory, man.
It is one of the
people that don't know what a blood eagle is, I will very quickly describe it. It is a torture the method Vikings had that involves unpacking your lungs to the external world and keeping you alive for as long as possible.
Through the back. You had to
Through
use
the back, yeah.
You had to use an axe to chop up the ribs so you could spread them out and create these wings. Strange enough, it is even seen, they even kind of saw it as like a way of paying honor to a worthy enemy who had done something horrible. And if they sat through it without screaming, they redeemed themselves and they would be given a sword to hold when they died so they could go to Valhalla.
Yeah. Oh, man, that is...
There's a tiny part of it that sounds like, oh my God, that's so badass. And the rest of it sounds like murder and torture. And if you only see the, oh, that's so cool part, you might be a bit broken.
Yeah. Like Giga level of broken to some extent.
Yeah, I think worse. Like, Giga just saw penises and vaginas and everything.
Yeah, that's actually true. Plus, he had a roller coaster in his house, so how bad can he be? Like,
true. Yeah, he seems to have been, fun to a certain level at least.
But Peter, to round off the interview, because I don't want to keep you too long tonight, and not to put you on the spot, even though I know you're keen and I am keen as well to draw a line in the sand today. What is some advice you would give to people that are interested in Nordic or Viking tattoos?
Open a book. To sound selfish, I would argue go check out my TikTok, and listen to all of my stupid ass tattoo advice.
I would very much support that, because I also think that most people I've seen that are serious about doing Viking tattoos, and people follow you nowadays for tips and that. Like,
definitely. I mean, I think a lot of people turn to me for some sort of sage counsel, which is a terrible thing to do, by the way. I mean, don't put that responsibility on me. I'm definitely not suited for it. But I am a nerd, and I'm very good at nerding out, and that's how I've gotten to where I am. And therefore I recommend that you open a book and read about it, or watch some YouTube videos, or watch my TikToks, or just study, because all the information is out there. And there's a range of things that you should probably not get tattooed.
yeah.
And then there's a huge amount of things that you could get tattooed, and it's okay as long as you know what that is. And then there is of that, like, oh God, there's a sea of amazing artwork that you could just put it on your body. Like, it's all there. It's amazing. And this is a tiny bit of it. There are thousands of artifacts and that are Scandinavian. And if you don't feel particularly like tied in with Scandinavians, let's say you're French or Swiss or Italian, and you like the Celts or the Pigs, Google the Latin culture and get Latin art on you. There is so much, and it is beautiful, and you can have amazing tattoos composed to use this artwork in a beautiful way and adorn your body in absolutely fantastic ways. And there are so many great tattoo artists out there. I make again a little bit of I'll pat myself on the back. One of my projects is to promote other tattoo artists so that they get into the spotlight, both because their artwork is great, but also because they are needed by people around the world. Because I don't have time to tattoo everyone, and I don't want to tattoo everyone. I'd like to retire one day. But I want people to be able to get great tattoos. So I started the Nordic tattoo project. We made basically a catalog of Nordic/historical tattoo artists from all over the world.
Like Tuola or people like that, or
everyone that we can get to be involved in the project.
Excellent.
And we've got the volume 1 had 70 artists. We're working on another edition, which has 80 some artists in it. I lost count. And the goal is simply to make this accessible for everyone, and to make all the artwork visible, because I firmly believe that if you have that book in front of you and you leaf through it and you see the different arts, you will find one that you love. And I encourage people, like, find the right artist on the wrong side of the planet, save up money and go to them one day.
Oh, that's always my advice as well. Like, because I used to, I mean, no offense, I had a really great artist here in Denmark. We did a lot of cool stuff on me, but then later on I just found other artists that I really fucking love their work, and it's just better to save up.
It is, and it's worth traveling for. But at the same time, you might be saving up for a tattoo artist who is on the other side of the planet, while 3 miles down the road is another amazing artist who could do your other arm in the meantime that you will love too. And you might be stuck still and wanting to go to the other side of the planet, but in the meantime, you can get more cool artwork, and those artists deserve great clients too, who are dedicated to this.
Absolutely.
So I'm just trying to open the doors and make everyone as visible as possible, and make the art as accessible as possible. It's also why I make the books with all the Nordic designs. I made a book about the runes and all these things. I just want it to be available, readily available, because it's taken me so many years to learn about this shit myself, to learn the amount that I know, and so many years to find all of these artists out there and see them grow. And a lot of them, like, I see their artwork grow, but I don't see their numbers growing because they're not good at social media. I am, my team is. So we take it upon ourselves to help them as much as we can to get more fame and get more clients so they can do bigger projects. And with bigger projects comes better projects. And it's lovely to see these people get a chance to excel at the artwork that they do. And they will get there eventually, even without my help. But I don't mind being a stepping stone, because, as I said, I don't have time to tattoo everyone anyways. And I'm not a greedy person. I believe in sharing much more than I believe in taking. So that's my recommendation to people. Research. look into it. Take your time. Don't just go down to the corner tattoo studio and be like, I want this one that Ragnar has on his head because it's a Viking tattoo. P.S. It isn't. It's an early Iron Age style 1 tattoo. So you're wrong.
You do love saying that. You're wrong.
Well, yeah, I do, because it is funny. I
will also reveal at the end here, which anybody watching it when this has come out will know because they will have read the title. But the title of this is absolutely offered by Peter without knowing it, which is "You're not a Viking."
Yeah, well, am I allowed to swear? I've already sweared lots.
Oh, you can swear. I mean,
plus
we're Danes, both of us.
Yeah, it's really ingrained as the sentence is, "You're not a fucking Viking." I am working on a T-shirt with it on, and possibly by the time your podcast is out, there will also be a little book out. I'll give a tease about it called 100 Reasons You're Not a Fucking Viking.
I need that book. I need and the T-shirt, honestly.
I'll send you a T-shirt, mate.
Oh, that's so sweet, Peter. Well, on that note, actually, because you've already started it, so we might as well continue. Do you have anything else you want to plug, and where can people find you?
I rudely plugged myself because it's really hard not to, because it's easy. It's easy to use what I've created, because what I've created is targeted at the people who want this kind of artwork, right? But you can find me on social media and everywhere else as northernblack.com or northernblack. I dread saying my own Instagram right now because we're changing the name of it. So I don't know. But if you find Northern Black on Instagram and Northern Black TikTok on TikTok, I'm also on YouTube somewhere. I don't remember our handle there. But if you find any of the profile, we do have this weird link tree, so you can find me from there. Northernblack.shop if you want to buy any of the books and stuff like that. And in general, I have a social media team. We try to be everywhere. We're very annoying. We've got lots.
I do hope to have the money for a social media team one day, because I also am not the best at social media, but I'm trying.
It's a hard thing. It is like, well, I think it's like trying to conquer England in a longship. Very hard task, especially because the battleground does keep changing. Like social, you never know what you're dealing with on social media. It's hard work, but I've gotten here through being stubborn as fuck. So that's my best recommendation in general to everyone out there. If you want to obtain something in life, just be stubborn as fuck, and it'll happen eventually.
I'll try. on that note, and that I think positive piece of advice. Thank you so much for being here, Peter, and to anybody listening, we'll see you again in a few weeks.
Thank you for having me, man. It was an absolute pleasure.
Oh man, precious man. Hello everyone. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that episode with Peter Oakmund from Northern Black in the north of England. We got through a lot of stuff all regarding Nordic tattooing and that. And if you're wondering why I'm talking to you again now in a new video recording, it's because I'm trying something new and adding some outros to my episodes. This is also a good test for the new webcam I brought, so hopefully episodes from now on, if I figure stuff out a bit better, will be much better quality, resolution-wise for the video recordings. The audio recordings should still stay the same, but I will also add outros to them. And the purpose for that will be clear in a little bit. Main purpose of these will be to also let you know what's going to happen in the next episode. For example, in this case, next time on the episode 6 of the podcast, I'll be talking to a good friend of mine who tattoos down under in Melbourne. Sia Tattoos, or Alicia, as she's also known. And we'll be talking about how it is to travel as a tattoo artist, both regarding some of the cool stuff and the really cool upsides to traveling as a tattoo artist, how it's a really cool part of the profession often, but also looking more realistically at some of the things you have to keep in mind when you want to travel, especially if you haven't done it much yet in your tattoo artist career. Hopefully I'll also give you some cool insights of some of the realities tattoo artists face when traveling, stuff with visas or the different regulations to what you can and cannot bring into different countries around the world, how they view tattooing in different countries, even if you are going there to tattoo. It's going to be a fun and very informative episode as usual, I think. And as I said, Sia has no small amount of experience with this, as you're going to come to learn come next episode in a couple of weeks' time. As she is originally from Spain and has lived in Australia for many years, but has also traveled extensively as a tattoo artist for her career. And funny enough, was traveling when we recorded. So, as you may know, as I've already explained, I am doing this all on my own, and I'm learning as I go. So hopefully this will be an improvement. It will be a fun addition to the podcast episodes. I know that I'm reading off a script for once, which is not normally my thing, but I'm trying to improve and make something a bit more structured for these outros, whereas I love to keep the episodes very much organic and fluid. I stick to the topics I have, and I have interview guides I use, spoiler there. But very much want it to be conversational and informative, but also entertaining for both me, you, and the guests who are part of the episodes. I also want to announce that in the future, probably sometime next year, there will be a Patreon put up for this. Hopefully we'll have enough fans that it doesn't seem facetious to start a Patreon. This will be so that you can support me and help me keep this going and help me make this grow and improve steadily as we move on. Hopefully some of you guys would be interested in supporting the Patreon. I'll put as much work into it as I can, and the more that's supported, the more work I can afford to put into it, as I also need to live and eat and all that stuff. But enough of that. I want to thank everybody who enjoys the episode so far for their support, and I'll see you guys in a few weeks.